On the morning before the assault, a heavy silence hung over the legion's camp. Ancient Roman engineers calmly tightened knots made of ox sinews on giant wooden ballista frames, while people froze in terror on the walls of the doomed city. This was where it all began, and this was where everything was decided. Most people do not even understand how it worked, imagining only fierce hand-to-hand combat with short swords. But the real truth was much harsher. Historians rarely talk about this, preoccupied as they are with the intrigues of the Senate and the golden triumphs of the emperors. However, it was a system on which everything depended, a ruthless, mathematically precise mechanism of total destruction. Without it, Rome would never have become an empire capable of methodically wiping entire states off the face of the earth. The launch of these machines changed the course of history because at that moment a terrifying technology was born, whose true secret is still hidden under centuries-old ruins. At dawn, the legion was already fully assembled on top of a rocky hill. Thick fog slowly crept down into the valley, revealing the high walls of the enemy city. The soldiers breathed heavily in the cold air, gripping their long spears and heavy wooden shields tightly. They knew full well that retreat was forbidden by the harsh, unquestionable laws of the great empire. There was no place in this iron formation for weak or hesitant warriors. Every step these men took was mathematically calculated by the best engineers of the military headquarters. Tools clattered dully on the frozen ground, breaking up the unyielding soil to lay solid earthen foundations. Wooden beams were methodically unloaded from heavy carts, forming endless rows of building materials. A mistake in the calculations would cost not just the life of a single carpenter, but the defeat of the entire vast army. Discipline worked flawlessly because it was always much stronger than any instinctive fear of death. The legion did not break under a hail of enemy arrows. It simply instantly reorganized itself into perfect battle order. Where other armies succumbed to panic, Rome methodically and coolly built an impregnable fortified camp. Thousands of soldiers dug deep trenches with the same coordination with which they wielded heavy battle swords. Every ordinary legionnaire knew his exact place in this huge, ruthless living mechanism. There were many thousands of them, but they always acted strictly as one giant, coordinated organism. Deviating from the planned course always meant indelible historical shame for the entire glorious cohort. And this social disgrace was hundreds of times worse than the most painful physical death on the battlefield. Work crews built earthen ramparts faster than the enemy could comprehend the scale of the impending mortal threat. Stone was laid upon stone, wood was fastened to wood, and an invincible siege structure was born. This was not just utilitarian construction. It was an uncompromising affirmation of total state power. Every stone road laid by the legionnaires inevitably and absolutely led back to the capital of the empire. These transport arteries did not simply connect cities. They firmly bound distant conquered lands. Where yesterday there was an impassable swamp, today a heavily armed imperial legion marched in orderly formation. Military engineers worked with wood as precisely as the advanced troops systematically destroyed their enemies. Rome never left random traces of its presence. It left behind a fundamental transport infrastructure for all time. The heavy stone quarried from the quarries was guaranteed to survive many centuries to come. The soldiers built as if they knew for sure that their work would be observed for millennia to come. It was a cyclopean structure that no other army in the world could physically replicate. The defensive walls were not built for aesthetic beauty, but solely for the purpose of controlling the territory. Even turbulent rivers and deep groundwater obediently submitted to the strict mathematical calculations of the aqueducts. Everything in this valley depended solely on a single brief order from the gray-haired commander. The fate of tens of thousands of innocent lives depended on the outcome of this massive engineering confrontation. The empire simply could not afford to lose this strategically critical military siege. And the state apparatus had no intention of giving the enemy a single chance of escape. It was a system that built its empire faster than the rest of the world could stop it. Right behind the fresh earthen ramparts, engineers began unpacking the parts of heavy wooden machines. Rome did not rely solely on people. It always relied on impeccable technological and military order. Every skilled craftsman was an indispensable part of this deadly wooden mechanism on the battlefield. Strict assembly standards allowed artillery pieces to be erected on site in a matter of hours in the morning. The power of the Empire was physically felt in every creak of the tensioned fibers and every heavy blow of the hammer. Here, without exception, everything was subject to strict mathematical calculations and ancient physical formulas. Compact catapults, known to legionnaires as scorpions, were assembled from pre-prepared standardized parts. These deadly devices were the perfect combination of sturdy wood, iron, and tightly twisted cables. The crew of each weapon operated with the automatism honed by years of continuous grueling training in the camps. An error in the tension of the torsion springs could lead to the instant destruction of the entire complex engineering structure. The Scorpion worked by releasing the enormous potential energy of twisted bundles of animal tendons. Soldiers turned heavy winches, slowly pulling back a sturdy bowstring with an iron bolt attached to it. The sound of the tendons being pulled back resembled the low hum of a huge swarm of angry wild bees in the silence. The tension of the wood reached its physical limit, ready to release its accumulated fury at any moment. The metal latch of the trigger mechanism reliably secured this incredible force until the right tactical moment. The Scorpion's mechanism never depended on the physical fatigue or emotional state of the shooter. The Legion's engineering used the principles of soulless and methodical destruction of targets predetermined by the commander. The Roman machine knew no mercy. It simply carried out the destructive program laid down in it by the engineers. The gun crew worked in perfect synchrony, reloading the powerful ballista in record time. The continuous barrage of fire broke the morale of the besieged much more effectively than direct bloody assaults. Spare parts for the machines were always on hand with the responsible army quartermasters. If a lever broke, it was immediately replaced with an identical copy from the arriving logistics convoys. Standardization of production was the main secret of the incredible effectiveness of Roman field artillery throughout Europe. Every workshop in the Empire produced bolts and beams strictly according to uniform, approved state drawings. This allowed the legions to quickly repair their equipment in any province, even the most remote and wild ones. When a battery of Scorpions opened fire, the sky quickly darkened with flying wrought iron. Heavy shells fell with frightening regularity, leaving no safe areas on the fortress walls. The effectiveness of this long-range weapon lay not in its single-shot damage, but in its absolute mathematical inevitability. The defenders understood that the enemy machine would never tire, never panic, and never retreat. At that moment, the man on the other side of the wall finally ceased to be a full-fledged human being. The metal sank deep into the wood of the gates and the stonework of the high towers with a dull crunch. Roman engineering did not simply kill, it methodically destroyed the very last hope of salvation. The soldiers' loyalty to their bloody work was encouraged, and any delay in their work was severely and quickly punished. The Empire did not ask the besieged for their consent to death. It simply dictated its harsh terms. It was a system designed for the aggressive expansion of its borders by any technical means available. Following the light Scorpions, massive calculations of heavy ballistae were moved into prepared positions. These giant siege engines required perfectly flat sights and deep solid earth foundations. Engineers carefully measured the angles of the frozen ground using special lead plumb lines and levels. Heavy oak frames were fastened with massive iron brackets and thick forged nails. Preparing to fire took many hours, but the destructive result always justified these colossal efforts. The ballista worked on the same basic torsion principle as its lighter younger brother, the Scorpion. However, its gigantic size allowed it to hurl massive stone balls and thick logs over enormous distances. Two huge vertical beams made of horsehair and animal sinews created incredible internal tension. Tightening the taut bowstring required the combined efforts of dozens of strong men turning the creaking wooden gates. The sound of this process carried across the entire battlefield, instilling primitive terror in the trapped besieged. Calibrating the ballista was a complex process of precise acoustic tuning of the tension force. Craftsmen carefully tapped the taut sinews with wooden hammers, listening to the pitch of the sound they made. If the pitch of the two beams differed even slightly, the heavy projectile would inevitably deviate from its intended trajectory. Synchronizing these elements required perfect pitch and years of practical experience with artillery. It was deadly military music played on strings as thick as a human arm. When the heavy stone crashed into its target, the ground literally shook beneath the feet of the standing soldiers. Fragments of the destroyed wall flew in all directions, maiming the defenders with deadly, unpredictable shrapnel. The ballista did not simply mechanically destroy fortifications. It punched wide gaps in the very consciousness of the enemy. The continuity and methodical nature of these strikes deprived the besieged of the physical ability to regroup their meager forces. It was a machine that systematically reduced absolutely any obstacle in the path of the legions to dust. The logistics of continuously supplying these huge weapons required enormous organizational and transportation efforts. Special teams of stonecutters worked continuously in the nearest captured quarries, carving out perfect spheres. Wagons with heavy ammunition stretched in a continuous long line from the quarries directly to the combat positions. Roman logistics worked with the precision of a Swiss chronometer, ensuring that there was no shortage of shells at the front. Each stone was strictly accounted for, weighed and delivered to its destination, strictly according to the schedule approved by the headquarters. The power of the empire was physically felt in every heavy stone flying through the smoke-filled sky. Rome was completely independent of a single skilled archer or a single brave infantryman with a short sword. It depended on the smooth operation of thousands of invisible threads of army supply and reliable communication. If a ballista suddenly broke down, it was immediately replaced with a new one assembled from spare parts. The mechanism of justice over rebellious territories categorically did not allow for any logistical stoppages or interruptions. Slowly but surely, the city's defenses began to crack under the weight of the blows. The deadly rain of stones continued day and night, depriving the defenders of the sleep they needed. Each new shot from the ballista brought the inevitable bloody end of this long and exhausting siege closer. The laws of strict physics were a much more powerful weapon in the hands of the Romans than the wild fury of the barbarians. This system was absolutely unshakable in its pursuit of total military and political domination. While ballistas fired directly, heavy onagers were being prepared to enter the fray in the rear. These massive single-shouldered catapults were designed to fire heavy, uneven stone boulders. The name of the machine itself came from a wild donkey, known for its powerful and sharp kick with its hind hoof. The onager's construction was massive, angular, and required a huge amount of strong, high-quality wood. The weapons were always mounted on thick cushions of brushwood and earth to dampen their monstrous recoil. The heart of the onager was a single horizontal bundle of tightly twisted strong tendons. A massive wooden lever was inserted into this bundle, with a sling and projectile attached to its upper end. When tensioned, this lever was lowered to the ground using a powerful system of blocks and winches. The tension was so great that the wooden frame creaked and groaned menacingly under the pressure. The release of this energy produced a powerful blow that threw the entire huge structure high into the air. Absolutely any heavy object could serve as a projectile for the onager, including baskets with an incendiary mixture. Burning sticky resin and sulfur fell on the roofs of houses, causing large-scale, uncontrollable urban fires. Defenders could not hide from this threat behind the high front walls of their stone towers. The curved flight path allowed death to be delivered right into the center of a densely populated, peaceful city. The Romans always used fire not as an element, but as a strictly controlled instrument of mass destruction. The accuracy of the onagers was lower than that of ballistas, but this was more than compensated for by their destructive power. They did not target individual enemy soldiers, but rather the vital infrastructure of the enemy settlement. The destruction of food stores and drinking water reservoirs was a priority for the artillery. The besieged began to suffer greatly from thirst and hunger long before their strong walls collapsed. The physical exhaustion of the enemy was an essential part of the overall plan for their complete and unconditional submission. The crews worked in a thick cloud of dust raised by the constant heavy recoil of the heavy machines. The soldier's skin was completely black from ingrained dirt, machine oil, and the soot of burning tar torches. They could not see the faces of those whom their blind shells were killing on the other side of the high walls. This depersonalization of the enemy made the process of destruction psychologically comfortable and absolutely routine for the army. The machine killed without emotion, and the people who operated it became just as indifferent over time. Engineers continued to adjust and repair siege engines by the dim, flickering light of campfires. Their hard work did not stop for a single minute, ensuring round-the-clock artillery terror. Fatigue was no excuse when it came to carrying out a direct order from the high command. Every cog in this machine knew that his personal work was bringing the enemy's final defeat closer. It was a relentless conveyor belt of death, constantly operating with the precision of an expensive clockwork mechanism. The effectiveness of the siege engines depended directly on the smooth, round-the-clock operation of the rear services. Hundreds of creaking carts arrived at the camp every day, delivering fresh provisions, tools, and ammunition. The roads recently laid by legionnaires now served as the main arteries of this military machine. Each cart was registered, and its valuable cargo was carefully weighed and recorded in a ledger. Roman bureaucracy was as powerful and deadly a weapon as heavy torsion ballistas. The feeding of the huge army was organized with frightening methodicalness and absolute mathematical calculation of calories. Soldiers received standard rations of grain, cheese, and sour wine at strictly defined times. Food was prepared in small groups called contubernia to save time and precious firewood. This system ensured that thousands of people were always fed and ready for hard physical labor. Hunger could destroy an army faster than any enemy, and the system never allowed such fatal mistakes. The water supply for the huge camp required equally complex engineering solutions and constant strict control. Soldiers dug deep artesian wells or built temporary aqueducts to deliver clean, fresh water. Hygiene was maintained at the highest level to prevent outbreaks of deadly infectious diseases among the troops. Field hospitals were deployed as quickly as heavy, deadly siege weapons. Concern for the health of legionnaires was dictated not by humanism, but by the simple desire to preserve a valuable state resource. Armor and weapons were constantly repaired in mobile smithies, thick with smoke on the outskirts of the camp. The clanging of heavy hammers on anvils did not cease day or night, providing soldiers with reliable protection. Worn metal parts of mechanisms were remelted and reforged at an incredible, frightening speed. This closed production cycle allowed the army to function in complete isolation from central supply bases. The camp was a fully fledged, autonomous, fortified city, created exclusively for waging war. The organization of the interior space within the camp was subject to strict geometric standards of urban planning. The tents stood in perfectly straight rows, forming wide longitudinal streets for the rapid movement of troops. Every legionnaire could quickly find the commander's tent or the necessary ammunition depot with his eyes closed. Order was absolute, completely eliminating the slightest manifestations of chaos or disorganization in the ranks of soldiers. It was this predictability that made the Roman army invincible in any difficult climatic conditions. Communication between units was maintained through a complex system of audible and visual signals. Buglers and trumpeters unerringly transmitted orders over vast distances through the deafening noise of heavy combat. Messengers raced through the dusty streets of the camp, delivering sealed written orders from the high command. Information circulated through the veins of this closed system as quickly as blood in a healthy human body. Officers always had a complete picture of the current situation on every section of the front. The besieged watched this incessant ant-like activity with growing horror from behind their crumbling walls. They saw with their own eyes that Rome's resources seemed truly endless and inexhaustible in this war. The hope that the enemy would soon tire or run out of supplies faded with each new dawn. The system clearly demonstrated its ability to maintain a tight siege for months and even years. It was a demonstration of total logistical superiority, leaving no chance of escape. Each heavy shell flying over the walls destroyed not only stone, but also the fragile human psyche. The continuous rhythm of powerful shelling acted on the defenders like sophisticated torture through prolonged sleep deprivation. People flinched at every slight loud noise, expecting a new deadly blow from the gray skies. Children cried in dark, damp basements, while adults stared at the cracking vaults with undisguised horror. Animal fear permeated the air of the city, becoming thicker than the acrid black smoke from the constantly burning buildings. The Romans understood perfectly well the importance of this invisible psychological weapon in a protracted siege war. They deliberately varied the intervals between artillery salvos so that the enemy could not get used to the rhythm. Sometimes there was a frightening, ringing silence, forcing the defenders to peer intently into the gray, dusty distance. And then came the massive, simultaneous strike of all the heavy batteries, sweeping away entire sections of the walls. Paradoxically, the predictability of the machines always created absolute unpredictability for their victims. At night, the besiegers' camp glowed with thousands of bright lights, demonstrating the confidence and calm strength of the legions. This steady light was a constant reminder to the besieged that there was nowhere to retreat. Roman patrols methodically circled the entire perimeter, leaving no chance for a secret escape in the darkness. A mistake in organizing the night watch cost an officer his successful career and sometimes his own life. Order on the front line was as strict as in the very center of the great eternal city. When the defenders ran out of iron arrows, they began desperately throwing stones and debris from the houses. This was a manifestation of extreme animal despair, causing no serious damage to the well-protected Romans. Engineers, under the reliable cover of heavy wooden shields, continued to slowly move the siege towers forward. These giant multi-story structures on creaky wooden wheels crept inexorably toward the walls. The creaking of their unlubricated axles sounded like a long funeral march for the entire defending side of the conflict. Death from starvation became as dreary a routine as death from a flying stone ball. The corpses simply could not be buried fast enough, and the heavy smell of decay mingled with the aromas of burning tar. Disease began to mow down the weakened defenders faster than the Roman lead bullets from the soldiers' slings. It was a local apocalypse in miniature, organized strictly according to the rules of Roman military engineering, and the machine continued to work smoothly, methodically tightening the steel ring around the doomed people. On that momentous day, when the defenders stopped returning fire, it became clear that the end was near. They no longer had the physical strength even to draw the strings of their light bows. Rome had completely achieved its main goal. It had finally paralyzed the enemy's will to resist. Now, all that remained was to deliver the final, crushing blow to end this long military campaign. The pressure of the siege had reached its absolute peak, and the walls were ready to collapse under its monstrous weight. Early in the foggy morning, the commander raised his hand, signaling the start of the final stage of the bloody assault. All the siege engines of the huge camp simultaneously opened heavy fire on one specific section of the wall. This incredibly coordinated volley was the result of weeks of mathematical calculations and precise sighting. The air burst with a deafening roar from thousands of wooden torsion mechanisms being released. The sky literally blackened from thousands of flying stones, burning barrels, and heavy iron armor-piercing bolts. The masonry, already severely weakened by previous long bombardments, could not withstand such pressure. Huge, heavy blocks began to fall out of the wall, crashing with a roar into the deep defensive moat. Thick columns of dry dust rose up, hiding what was happening from the eyes of observers for several long minutes. The ground shook so violently that the legionnaires standing there had to brace themselves firmly against the solid ground. This was not just local destruction, it was the complete erasure of a physical barrier from the face of the earth. The Scorpions continued to fire precision sniper shots at the surviving towers, covering the advancing soldiers. The sniper accuracy of these reliable machines allowed them to take out the shooters right above the heads of their advancing comrades. The synchronization of the joint actions of the infantry and artillery was brought by the officers to an absolute, unattainable ideal. No other army in the ancient world possessed such an incredible level of tactical coordination between troops. The Romans left no trace of uncertainty behind them, only blood and total destruction. Inside the captured city, a methodical, bloody cleansing of the streets began, which had turned into a maze of stone rubble. Fire from heavy incendiary projectiles from Onager spread from house to house, lighting the way for the legions. Almost no prisoners were taken, as they cold-bloodedly carried out the harsh order to intimidate the neighboring rebellious provinces. The soldiers wielded their short swords as monotonously as the engineers turned the creaking winches of their machines. Fatigue was not an acceptable excuse for leaving the enemy alive behind the lines. The cries of the desperately dying were drowned out by the continuous roar of collapsing buildings and the loud crackling of all-consuming flames. It was a moment of absolute triumph for an invincible system over the attempt of a single people to defend their independence. Rome never depended on the emotions of the victors. It demanded an immediate, dry report on the work done. Scribes had already begun to meticulously count the amount of captured valuables to replenish the imperial treasury. On that bloody day, it was not just the fate of a small, weakly fortified settlement on the outskirts that was being decided. On that day, the mighty empire clearly demonstrated to the whole world the terrible consequences of disobeying its laws. Everyone who saw these smoking ruins learned a terrible lesson about the superiority of Roman military engineering. The machine had finally proven its ability to break any will and reduce any strong stone to dust. This was the peak of tension, after which there always followed a cold and calculated phase of assimilation of the territory. As soon as the thick dust from the collapsed walls finally settled, the process of rigorous inventory of the captured territory began. Engineers quickly replaced their combat calculations with precise surveying instruments to assess the damage. The empire had no intention of leaving these rich lands empty as a scorched, lifeless desert. The city, destroyed to its foundations, was to become a solid foundation for a new, completely loyal colony of Rome. The assessment of suitable building materials was always carried out with frightening pedantry and incredible speed. Special military units methodically sorted the surviving inhabitants for subsequent profitable sale in the markets. People were assessed solely on their current physical parameters and ability to perform heavy, exhausting labor. Women, the elderly, and children were distributed among different groups strictly according to established bureaucratic quotas. There was no cruelty for cruelty's sake in this process, only dry economic calculation. Living goods were as valuable a resource to the empire as mined gold, iron, or high-quality timber. The siege engines, having flawlessly accomplished their destructive task, began to be slowly dismantled into their component parts. The torsion mechanisms were carefully loosened, and the wooden beams were marked with bright paint for easy transport. This unique technology cost a fortune, and its preservation was guaranteed by strict military regulations. Rome did not squander its expensive weapons, but carefully packed them away for the next military campaign. The mechanisms were thoroughly cleaned of blood and dirt so that they could soon resume their deadly work. Road engineers were already drawing new routes on the ground that would pass right through the ruins of this city. Rome's sturdy roads were to connect this point to a vast network of fast imperial communications. Stone was laid evenly on stone, and in place of blood and pain, a flawless transport infrastructure was born. Nothing could stop this grandiose process of expansion, organized at the highest level of government. The system simply ruthlessly swallowed up another obstacle and began to digest its useful resources. For the weary legionnaires, this day was no different from hundreds of other days of endless military service. The fatigue after the assault did not give them the right to long rest or festive idleness. Immediately after the bloody mop-up, they began to build a new permanent garrison fort from the captured stone. Their rough hands, still slippery with foreign blood, habitually took up heavy construction shovels. Soldiers did not choose their fate. Their bodies belonged entirely to the soulless state apparatus of coercion. The victor's power was asserted not by loud cries of victory, but by the monotonous pounding of heavy carpenters' hammers. Rome clearly demonstrated its right to this land by immediately beginning to rebuild it from the ground up. The surviving locals watched the aggressors' unbridled creative energy with primitive horror. They understood that it was absolutely useless to resist a mechanism that built faster than they could think. Psychological submission was formed precisely through the demonstration of the invaders' absolute industrial superiority. Reports on the capture of the city were immediately sent to the capital by the fastest horse couriers. The Senate needed to know the exact dry figures of losses, captured trophies, and ammunition spent on the siege. This information was used by the headquarters to analyze the effectiveness of the tactics used and to adjust future plans. The empire was constantly learning, improving its methods of brutal suppression and control of vast territories. Mistakes were unacceptable, but if they did happen, the system instantly adapted to the new conditions. The smell of terrible burning slowly dissipated under the influence of the fresh wind blowing from the distant green hills. The map of the entire region changed forever at that very moment, receiving new borders and Roman names. But for the vast machinery of power, this was just one insignificant episode in a long history of expansion. Roman catapult construction standards had brilliantly proven their worth in practice for the 1000th time, and the deadly machine was fully ready to move on, grinding down new countries and rebellious peoples. The main conclusion of this brutal military campaign was the total superiority of technology over ordinary bravery. The defenders of the city may have been incredibly brave and desperate warriors, ready to die for their freedom. But their personal courage meant absolutely nothing against the mathematically calculated trajectory of a flying stone. Ballistas and onagers killed en masse, without risk to the lives of those who operated them with winches. Rome did not simply win local battles, it completely changed the very concept of large-scale warfare. The standardization of wooden parts made the army independent of accidental damage or the absence of unique craftsmen. Any damaged ballista lever could be replaced with an identical one in a matter of minutes, even under enemy fire. This logistical unification was a true engineering marvel, centuries ahead of its time. The system worked absolutely reliably precisely because it excluded the factor of human individuality from the calculations. The Romans created the world's first effective combat robots, made of durable wood and tendons. The conquered peoples could offer nothing against this structure except chaotic animal fury. But the fury quickly died down, breaking against the even rows of legionary shields and endless hail of shells. The intelligence of Roman engineers proved to be a much more powerful weapon than the physical strength of the wild barbarians. Each new victory only confirmed the correctness of Rome's chosen path of relentless technological development. A mistake would have cost the state its life, so engineering was always generously funded, first and foremost. After this exemplary siege, the legion's tactics became even more sophisticated and deadly to their enemies. Officers took into account all minor delays in the assembly of machines and made strict changes to military regulations. The system constantly improved itself, analyzing its weaknesses and instantly turning them into new strengths. There was no room for stagnation in this iron discipline. The empire demanded constant forward movement, and this relentless progress was always paid for with the blood of those who did not want to submit to the New World Order. The few who survived the assault became living witnesses to the absolute invincibility of Roman weapons. They quickly spread rumors of wooden monsters throwing lightning bolts far beyond their ravaged lands. This instilled fear became an excellent diplomatic tool, forcing entire countries to surrender without a fight. This demonstration of power saved the empire enormous resources by preventing future unnecessary bloodshed. Psychological warfare has always been cheaper and more effective than long and exhausting months of frontal sieges. Rome never stopped at the achieved result. It simply integrated new lands into its structure. Administrative buildings and courts for governing the province instantly sprang up in place of the towers that had been razed to the ground. Roman law replaced local barbarian customs as quickly as the legionnaires replaced local rulers. This huge assimilation machine worked flawlessly, turning former sworn enemies into obedient taxpayers. Power was physically felt in every stone of the new buildings, erected according to strict imperial designs. The names of resistance heroes were quickly and permanently erased from history, replaced by dry lines and reports. The state never allowed the memory of those who dared to challenge its authority to be preserved. Individuals disappeared, completely dissolving into the relentless flow of time and targeted state propaganda. Only numbers remained: the number of slaves captured, kilometers of roads built, and tons of grain harvested. It was an absolute unconditional victory of the machine over fragile human individuality and emotions. Legionnaires who successfully completed their tasks did not receive special honors or long periods of rest. They simply gathered their heavy camping equipment and set off on another long and arduous march. Their real home was not distant Italy. Their home was the orderly ranks and the dusty, endless road. They knew full well that they could die far from their native lands, pierced by a random barbarian arrow. But the vast, insatiable, and great military empire had long since become their home. In the absolute silence of the ruins, only the wind stirred the dirty remains of the burnt banners of the defeated independent people. From that day on, a new, extremely harsh, and absolutely predictable Roman order was established here forever. No one would dare to raise a pitiful weapon against the legions in this region, which had been razed to the ground. The system had suppressed yet another rebellion with such frightening ease that the very thought of resistance seemed insane. The world had changed forever because the empire had once again shown its true steel teeth. The engineers who designed these ingenious machines of death remained forever in the shadow of their great creations. No one remembered their names or faces, but their designs continued to kill thousands at the borders. It was the highest form of service to the state, to completely dissolve one's genius into the efficiency of the mechanism. Rome did not rely on outstanding individuals. It relied on the formulas and standards they created. And these military standards proved to be much more durable than any human flesh or solid stone fortifications. Centuries later, the wooden scorpions and huge ballistas finally rotted away, turning into ordinary dust. The metal forged parts rusted and crumbled into dust under the relentless flow of time. Nothing physical remained of the giant siege engine except for the smooth earthen ramparts of the forgotten camp. But the principles laid down in these mechanisms forever changed the course of human military history. The idea of strict standardization and interchangeability of parts became the basis of all future industrial production. Modern military robots on the battlefield operate on the same principles of ruthless efficiency. They are completely devoid of emotion, know no fear, and calculate each shot trajectory with mathematical precision. Roman engineers were the first in the world to realize the superiority of a mechanical system over the fragile biological organism of a soldier. They laid the foundation for a way of thinking in which war became simply a complex logistical and physical process. The price of human life instantly fell to zero in the face of the absolute expediency of the state apparatus. People had long since disappeared, their bones becoming part of the very land for which they had fought so fiercely. The empire also collapsed over time, unable to withstand its own enormous weight and internal social contradictions. But the structure of thinking that created this harsh order remained alive in the basic laws of European civilization. Every smooth road and every sturdy bridge in Europe bears echoes of that harsh era. The architecture of total control outlived its creators, proving its incredible conceptual stability. Rome did not simply conquer foreign territories. It reprogrammed reality according to its incredibly strict standards. Cities were built according to a single rigid template, ensuring maximum manageability and control over the population. The mechanism of the complex ballista was only a miniature model of how this gigantic state functioned. The tension of the torsion bars symbolized the hidden tension of a society ready to strike a crushing blow at any moment. This system was originally created for expansion, and it was physically incapable of existing in a state of rest. The ruins left after the devastating bombardment by onagers have long been overgrown with thick green spring grass. But deep underground, the smooth stone blocks laid by Roman engineers still lie. They bear witness to the colossal power that could change landscapes through willpower and mathematical calculation. The stone remains lying there forever, serving as a silent historical rebuke to any attempt to forget the lessons of the past. There is no sorrow in these remains, only a cold statement of absolute technological dominance. When studying the history of Rome, one can see not just a long series of insane emperors or bloody battles. There one can clearly see the birth of the world's first global machine for processing human resources. The mistake cost the entire army defeat, so the system punished it without the slightest regret. Power dictated its harsh conditions, relying not on divine right, but on superiority in artillery. It was the harsh, unbreakable truth of a world in which only those who calculated and built better survived. After this massive historical destruction, the map of the world was never the same or safe again. The empire harshly imposed its straight lines of roads on it, crossing out the destinies of dozens of independent tribes. But the system continued to function, not even noticing the disappearance of entire distinctive cultures and peoples. The machine has no memory or conscience whatsoever. It only has the algorithmic program embedded in it. And this program has always required the continuous absorption of space to maintain its internal fire. Assessing these events today, it is very easy to condemn the cruelty of the legions from the standpoint of modern humanistic morality. But it is impossible not to admire the incredible engineering genius with which all this was accomplished. They built faster than the enemy could comprehend the threat and killed more accurately than anyone before them. Their weapons were completely independent of fury. They depended on the perfect tension of dry animal sinews. It was an absolute triumph of reason aimed at the most effective destruction of their own kind. The stones remained lying in the ground, but the people who set them in motion had long since disappeared into time. The great empire fell, but its cold shadow continues to cover modern engineering and military thought. Rome did not stop. It simply dissolved forever into future generations of builders and destroyers. This story unconditionally proves the cruelest and most fundamental truth about the nature of absolute power. Rome did not win because of its people. It won because its system was stronger than any individual.